All right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ShadowDragon podcast. This is season four, special episode three in our series of human trafficking and open source intelligence. This comes on the back of a excellent webinar that we did with CACI's Dark Blue Intelligence Suite, um, where Kristen Carpenter showed how open source intelligence and ShadowDragon and Dark Blue can uh, can look and monitor for publicly available information and indicators for human trafficking. And we've got Matt Richardson back again, a repeat offender from the Anti-Human Trafficking and Intelligence Initiative, ATII. We'll put all the links in the show notes here. But Matt, uh, let's dive right in since we're coming right back to series or episode two. How can open source intelligence help a human trafficking case?
Well, a friend of mine in law enforcement said, the government databases and tool sets are fantastic, but they don't evolve and they don't necessarily update as quick as what we can see on open source. And the example that I was given by him was people don't always update their or renew their driver's license, but they always update their Facebooks and their Instagrams and so on. So
Yeah.
we know that social media can be a very rich and lucrative place to search for trafficking and other investigations. People tend to share quite a bit about themselves, in some cases more than you would think they would. So, um, one case in point, I'm just thinking out loud here, where we used OSINT through a trafficking investigation. So, um, through an anonymous dark web forum. We identified a user that was actively attempting to procure a very young female for a sexual encounter to celebrate his 30th birthday. So the forum featured, again, there was no CSAM or child sex abuse material. The forum offered kids for rent or for sale for certain amounts of US dollars or Bitcoin, basically, was what this was. So we were able to take certain artifacts. I can't say too much because we don't want to share maybe how we're finding them, but we were able to take what seemed like very obscure artifacts and information out of the forum by way of the chatter or the posts and the threads. And in the particular case I'm referencing, yeah, it didn't take too long before we were able to use open source methods to find social platforms, including a LinkedIn, an Instagram, a Facebook, um, certain what do you call them? Platforms of which the prospective child sex buyer held accounts, and in some of these, they're actually revealing their Christian names, their first and last names. We learned their career, where they lived, and we were able to actually, in this particular case, using open source methods, to not only find like personal social platforms where we learned a lot about the individual, close associates, family members, location, hobbies, and interests. But we were able to actually find things that would correlate with the dark web sort of anonymous figure, certain phrasing, certain language styles, certain references. Over to the other was certain this particular individual, and again, this is open source. We discovered held accounts that included some commercial pornography, and his commercial pornography preferences were rather consistent with what he was seeking to do with, let's say, a 6-year-old on the dark web. The commercial stuff was young adults, but the personal preferences for what this man wanted the encounter to be were highly consistent. So we were able to actually, in that case, use about 90% of that investigation was strictly open source, publicly available. Some of it was old and hard to find, but using OSINT tools and methodologies, we found it to create a lead that resulted in a sting and an arrest. That's like one particular, but I could go on. The majority of the investigations I've done on child sex trafficking, exploitation, human trafficking, all roads at one point or another, in my personal experience, lead through OSINT. OSINT is next to godliness.
You're speaking our language, Matt. I think the key thing to remember about OSINT is human nature. It used to be in a more
public forum, like a physical square in a city or a mall. But now everything, especially since COVID, everything happens online. And so the thing to remember is that people are always online. They have to have some form of presence there. And even if a given target doesn't have presence there, their mom does, or their cousin does, or their friend does, or the person they interact with does.
Hmm.
And that's the thing to remember is it's almost a really good TTP when you see someone who has almost no presence to go, well, that's not very normal, is it? And that's
Yeah.
that's an important thing. And you said something in your conversation that's really powerful. You said some of the stuff was old. And one of the
Old
things
data
that
is gold.
yeah, well, and one of the things that's happening right now today is I'm a father. I have kids. They play games, they do stuff. I'm pretty limited in what they can and can't do, but they're playing Minecraft. They're on some games and things, and everybody that will be a future criminal, well, maybe not everybody, but the majority of them are going to be playing Roblox today. They're going to be playing Fortnite. They're going to be playing Overwatch. They're going to be playing Minecraft. They're going to be doing that stuff and leaving a trail for who they are, even if they try to erase that in the future. That they will be doing that, and so it's an incre I think it's really just a story of human nature written on the internet,
Hmm.
and there's always a crumb, there's always a straw, there's always something there you can find. So I think that's a very powerful thing to remember.
Yeah.
Dan, I know you got stuff in there, but on the last episode we talked about, you know, these aren't machines, these aren't, the victims aren't machines, the perpetrators aren't machines. These are human beings. And so there's a lot of psychology that goes in there. Dan, do you have something to add from what you've seen?
Yeah, I would add to what Matt was talking about, kind of that stylometric analysis of analyzing writing styles. We've used that in other cases like property theft, where we do have some input with the adversary, but we may not know who they are just yet. But the more provocative we can be to either get them to move to a platform we control or to get them to talk more, that kind of can also helps segment out, like, how many actors am I talking to behind this particular profile or avatar. It may just be one, which is pretty common, but sometimes you'll see two or three different writing pattern styles come out, which kind of helps you also gauge an age range as well, of coupled with the writing style, right? So that was pretty helpful, in the past for me on targeting operations, and then where we didn't know who it was, and then specifically on human trafficking stuff, if you can get the victim to open up more, especially over a course of a few days, um, that may be actually pretty helpful, just because um, the person controlling them, they've got their own pattern of life. They've got to, go manage other things. So that's helpful. And being able to just differentiate, things via the writing style, like what you're talking about, can help. I like to also kind of be a little provocative sometimes, to get them to, do something where we can get a little bit more attribution, either click a link or get into a different platform, or talk about something. And the more you get them to talk, the more you've got, you're building rapport, and you're collecting information.
Yeah. So we talked last episode a lot about this industry, human trafficking itself is kind of a double-edged sword because a perpetrator has to advertise their product, which is a trafficked individual. Um, that's a vulnerability for them and an advantage for us as investigators. Uh, can you, Matt, talk a little bit about the how the illicit networks, the online marketplaces go together and how open source intelligence can be used? And then a follow-up question there is, I'm sure there's things that you can't do as ATII. Can you talk about some of the ethical guidelines and where sort of your job ends and the authorities begin?
Oh, well, certainly. So we're looking at OSINT and how we're able to use that to identify, in some cases, disrupt or deconstruct networks pertaining to trafficking. So, um, as mentioned earlier, a lot can be learned by reading the writings and the writing pose of the individual. Pop culture references can help indicate an age bracket and or a location. It is very difficult for people my age, our age, to walk, talk, and act like we're 14. So when I see
You
that,
don't say skibbity, Matt. That's not something you say.
no, I heard
Sounds
that
kind of
word.
sus to me.
Skibbity would be a whole episode. I'm tell you what. Um, I don't know. I've tried to use slang with my 14-year-old son, and I just can't get it right. Like the word slay. I don't know. It sounds easy, but I screwed up. So, um, I tend to believe it when I see somebody who's plausible and they really sound like they're young. But if their pop culture references are older, then it helps me identify an age. And again, sometimes region. Um, Speaking of the networks, we touched on this in the previous one. So, example, taking a phrase from an ad. So, like, let's put this into a context that we can understand as good, normal humans. If I'm selling my bicycle and I want to sell it, and I'm gonna post that bicycle for sale on multiple platforms, hoping to get a faster sale for the bicycle. Am I going to write the ad from scratch each time, or am I going to copy and paste it? So they do the same thing we would do. We would copy the ad from platform A into platform B and then to platform C. So when they're posting to multiple escort sites or ads within one, they tend to
Mhm.
recycle that verbiage. And that verbiage, yeah, you can run it and see there's 1,100 hits. It could be that there's multiple different females, let's say, under the same ad. It
Right.
would link to multiple different jurisdictions, like they're in Atlanta one day and they're in like Anchorage, Alaska the next morning, which can indicate there's like a degree of centralization and control
Mhm.
there. Likewise, um, looking at the ads in themselves, I mean, that can help indicate that there's a larger structure at play. Even the but Go a little bit more granular when we look at the ads themselves. If you compare an ad written by a suspected trafficker versus that written by an independent who is under their own free will and accord in the sex industry. They're different. So let's say
Yeah.
women that are in the industry on their own free will. When they construct an ad, it's more eloquent, like sensual, typically speaking, the girlfriend experience in these things. And there'll be barriers in there. You must shower, you must be covered. This is off limits. Where when you look at the trafficked ones, or days of the week and times I'm available, right? The trafficked ones often enough, and again, there are people on their own free will that have no barriers, but I'm talking
Mhm.
about common things. Um, 24/7 availability. I'll do car dates. I'll do anything and everything for the right price. The way it's written is
Yeah, it's like desperation kind of.
yeah, like desperation, and I think it could indicate third-party control because the way a trafficker would write about the woman would be that that's a commodity. So they're not human. It's
Mhm.
like marketing Coca-Cola to them. So if they would, the way the women are written about by a third party does sound different. It's more derogatory, degrading, um, kind of filthy, gross language. Where when you look at the ones under where they're under their own, they write eloquently in the pictures and the images. The women want to look pretty and well looked after if they can, whereas the ones that are trafficked, often it's like a dirty, dank, dingy hotel room with heaps of laundry in
Mhm.
the corner, piles of water bottles, and in the background you can see the bathroom door open, the toilet seat up. These are like indicators that we look at when we see
Yeah.
that. Times or again, the eyes, and there seems to be a lack of emotion or deadness in them. Then we can go and we start picking that out apart: the phone number, email addresses, wallets if they're there, phrasing from the reverse image searches,
Yeah.
and then we can start to identify other avenues for putting together a network. Sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
No, yeah. I'm agreeing. Those
Uh,
those are really good identifiers.
Yeah. I think one of the questions he was asking though, obviously fantastic tradecraft type things. I mean, the toilet seat up, it's such an obvious thing. No girl by herself would ever do that. But but from an ethical and legal, framework, like how do you guys ensure that what you've collected is representable and then versus what's just more of an investigative kind of thing?
Hmm.
Oh, on that, so in a perfect world, a workup or a product is developed. To the best of our ability, we make it completely replicatable or reconstructible. For like, let's say the crime analyst at said law enforcement department to sit there and click through the links and see everything we saw in the right order and everything in a perfect world. Um, it's all open source. If it leverages a subscription tool like ShadowDragon or Dark Blue, we will annotate this particular piece was used using a subscription tool. More info can be provided upon request. If it's open source and it's publicly available, then there should be no debate on ethics or legality because there can be no expectation of privacy if we post information on the internet where there's 4 billion people online every day. So
Yeah.
I read into the ethical part on my end because we're not going deep, dark, or sorry, we're not going like deep web, no hacking, and there's no social engineering to gain access to perpetrators or any of that. Sorry.
Right. I do want to say one thing. One of the things I'm very proud of inside of Shadow Dragon tools, is that the majority of it, like 99% of it, is completely publicly reconstructible
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
anyone. So if you use something inside our Shadow Dragon tool set, we can show you it came from this URL. Here's the date you touched it. Here's when it was seen. So that's a really important part of that. You said at the beginning of this exactly the phrasing I use, reconstructible. It's a
Yeah.
reconstructible thing, and that's extremely important. Obviously, there's an enormous amount of this investigative world that does have a little harder things like a forum or how do we get
Hmm.
access to it and things like that. We don't do that directly from our tools. Obviously, it's a huge important part of the industry, but we don't do that in our tools. However, the reconstructible aspect is the thing I think a lot of people screw up in this stuff, and I think
Yeah,
it's
and I think
extremely important.
that's something that does dilute the industry in general because there are a few vendors out there that say they have a lot of open source intelligence, but it's not necessarily open source intelligence. It's just a database of stuff that they got from somewhere else, versus something that does have a timestamp that you can say, look, this is where the data was. This is how you can click, how you can see it in your, web browser or your, mobile app, and you can reconstruct that, or if you're law enforcement, you can go, serve the paperwork to get more information around that account. So there's not really any, crazy magic there. It's just very transparent.
Right.
Yeah. Um, just pivoting, Matt, we talked about last time some of the guidelines. One thing, we're all cut from the same cloth. We're all fathers as well. We're all in this industry and sector, and we have kids, so we have a vested interest in this in preventing human trafficking, frankly. How can we, let me reword it. The last time we talked, you said this all starts at the dinner table. How can we prevent it? How can we identify it? What should we all do?
Well, thank you. I'm glad that comes up because I'm here today as a member of the ATII and Canadian OSINT Center, somebody who investigates. But first and foremost, before I'm anything, I'm a father, as each of you are, many of us on the call are parents.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I've been teaching online safety in schools and a variety of venues for quite some time, quite a lot longer than I've been doing the work. But from the experience I have in the field, my personal lived experience and the training that I've received, I think we can simplify this. And my first message to parents out there is just take a moment and breathe. You know far more than you're giving yourself credit for. In fact, most of you on here already know everything you need to know to protect your kids from online exploitation and trafficking and other risks online. We already know it. So if I can use an anecdote, um, back when I was a kid, shopping malls, the arcades, places where young people hung out, predators naturally went there, target-rich environments. That's logical. And in today's day and age, yeah, the same logic holds. It's just these are online forums. Um, so if the kids are there, the young ladies are there, whatever they're looking for, then they will naturally be there. So like we know that. Now, in the real world, a lot can happen that can go wrong when our kids they want to walk to school alone. To or from a friend's house. We know that stuff can happen, but we don't let that, run our lives. What we can do is I'm a big fan of, okay, what's the common denominator here? And it's the kids. So rather than try to worry about platforms and emerging technologies, because you're never going to stay ahead of that, it is not humanly possible. And I'm afraid it's a red herring. We're looking at platforms and technology, and I have to learn all that to protect my kid, and it's overwhelming for me. But I'm going to say, hold on a minute, not so fast. If we harden the target, which is our kids, with good old fashioned tips that we grew up with, even in the 80s, you can go to the arcade, but don't leave with anyone without calling home and checking first. Remember payphones, here's 2 quarters. Uh, you know, um, if someone tries to arrest you and they say they're a police officer and they're not wearing a uniform, do not go with them. These are tried, tested, and true. Someone tries to get you to help them find their puppy at the playground. Don't go. Stay put. Tell an adult.
Yeah.
There's no police officer talk to a mom that has kids with her because statistically that's a very safe bet. So,
Candy van bad.
hey, yeah, right. Yeah, the white van free candy.
Yeah.
So in the 80s, though, when I was a kid, stranger danger, there was a hysteria around it, and it was a red herring. Statistically, the crime happened, but far more often it was people known to the kids that were the biggest risk to them. So we were looking for a stranger in a trench coat with the white van and candy in it, and we should have been looking at the neighbor's like 20-year-old son that wants to babysit. So today, technology to me is partly a red herring. Okay, so getting to the point. For the technology, keep it simple. Coffee break Google, I call it. You're having a coffee break, you get 10 minutes, grab your phone and Google online safety threats, TikTok safety children, things of that nature. Good old fashioned beat cop simple keywords. You can keep up on which platforms are doing better than others, looking up things like trust and safety and their rating or score on that, mechanisms for reporting abuse and harassment, all these things. If you like an app that your kids ask for and you do that and you're satisfied it's reasonably safe, what I do at my house is I limit my child, my older one, to 3. I can be conversant in 3. He does if he wants a fourth one, it's what one you get rid of. So when I say this is fought and won at the dinner table, it is hardening the target. Hey, we love you. How are you doing? How was your day at school? How did this go? What do you want to do on the weekend? You haven't
Yeah.
talked to Ben in a while. Like, talk to your kids. Driving to a hockey, a soccer, baseball practice, talk to them about their day and what's important to them. If you're present and engaged with your children are statistically so much safer just from that alone.
Yeah,
Or
totally agree. I I also think like if you're giving your kid a phone or a tablet, you're giving the whole world access to your kid. That's kind of not great, right? Like
it poses risks for sure. So that actually, Daniel, my next point, an age appropriate or a level of supervision appropriate to their age or maturity. So my older one tends to be very mature. He's an old soul. He's very calm. He lives a pretty good lifestyle. His friends are all low risk. I'm still aware of who he's talking with online and what he's doing, like I am offline, same thing. Another really easy one is don't allow the phone or tablet into the bathroom because that's a place that we're naturally comfortable being in states of undress and having privacy.
hmm,
So, an example, my son would kill me if I told you this, but I guess he might at some point. But one day he
It's
was
on the
going to walk.
internet now.
Yeah, it's online. Once it's there, it's always there.
watch out.
He was walking into the bathroom with his phone, and I went, "Where are you going with that?" And I kind of grabbed his wrist and go, "Where are you going with that?" And he goes, "Bathroom." And I go, "Not with that, you're not." He goes, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" I'm like, "Read a shampoo bottle, put the phone on the couch." So I keep the phone out of there. I let him use it in his bedroom, but I have to, like I'll say, leave the door open. I can overhear what's going on and check anytime. Those are really easy
Yeah.
things we can all do. You can never tell them you love them enough that they'll be believed, and you won't take away all their technology or blame them. They might threaten things like we'll hurt your family or no one will believe you. Tell them it's not true. And I'm going to leave it with this: mums and dads and caring adults out there, easy, easy, easy. One of the things I say to my son so much, it's like he's blue in the face. 3 words: stop, talk, and block. Someone or something makes you feel scared or gross. Stop talking, or if it's content, stop viewing it. If it's a conversation, block the user, but do not delete anything that may need to be used by the police. And talk. Talk to a trusted adult and get help. Stop, block, and talk. And if your kids
Hmm.
feel comfortable doing that and there's sufficient trust and open communication, things can't get that far in a great deal of the cases out there because they're going to talk to you and interventions can be made before anything gets too far in. And finally, images online are often used to coerce, so like sextortion, blackmail kids into wiring money or more sexual content. The National Center of Missing Exploited Children has a relatively new program, which I love plugging because this is a piece of great news called
Yeah.
Take It Down, designed by MIT students. It's a crawler. And there's a mechanism on the NCMEC website for reporting an image or images, videos. And the crawler can go and find them online and pull them all, and they hash them and prevent them from going back up. So where we did not have hope a couple of years ago, we have new hope in that. It's a lovely, wonderful
Nice.
program. I strongly encourage you to look it up.
Interesting.
Yeah, Nimick's great with that stuff. Um, Matt, you went over some of the topics. I wrote a blog a few months ago. It may have been longer than that. I'm getting old. Timelines are
Hey,
weird.
before you go down, I got a jet, so you guys keep rocking it.
Cool.
Adios.
Adios, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Great to meet you, Dan. Have a safe and lovely day, brother.
Thank you. Nice meeting you too.
Thanks.
So, yeah, I wrote a blog about this, and you went over everything. You made a cool at your stop thing. That's pretty awesome, though. But a few things that I've really stressed with. I have a number of daughters, and I'm from a massive family, many cousins and nephews. It's absurd how large our Christmases are. So there's a lot of times. Oh man, it's pretty wild. There's a lot of times though that I talk with parents about this stuff, and one of the things that you mentioned, the sextortion stuff, is like there's an enormous amount of pressure on kids nowadays to send pictures like that. So I really like the conversation about the bathroom with the technology, and there's social pressure on doing that kind of thing. And the reality is we all know the internet is just a giant hard drive to bother us in the future. I mean, you said you're from the 80s. I'm very glad that I didn't have that super hard drive forever, but that can be used against kids, that can be posted online, that can be, if you have a unique name and someone posts a picture and puts your name on it somewhere, Russian or something, it's never going away. It's just going to be indexed on, every single platform ever. And so that's a really important thing to do, even beyond just the sort of grooming or sort of trafficker type thing. It's just a really good idea. I think a few other things that are really important is not to accept gifts from people online. In the last podcast, you mentioned poverty plays a huge role in how people get pulled into this stuff. And it's important for children to recognize that gifts from just some random person online are could be very troublesome. Video chatting with people online can lead, that's a bit of a gateway drug to moving into much more explicit things. I think one of the big things that's really important, and you touched it earlier, was I think if someone is asking you to hide something, then that's a massive red flag right there. You mentioned your oldest is kind of, you know, pretty square, pretty good about that. I have more than one, and I've got one that is not so much that way. And I overheard a conversation with her, where her friends were talking about which apps you can just delete stuff off of easily and which ones you can and can't do that. And we had a very big conversation about how that's incredibly dangerous if you need to do that because you feel bad about something. You shouldn't feel bad about a conversation with someone else. And if that's the case, then deleting it is the last thing you want to do. And this is me as a parent having those dinner table conversations, talking through that stuff. And the other thing I'd say that I think is really important is I would say it's uncomfortable for a lot of parents is learning what's interesting for your kids. You mentioned the social media apps. I do a similar thing. I don't let them have like 50 of them. It's limited down to a handful of them. I've got one that if she asks me for Discord one more time, I'm gonna go crazy, but there's a set of them that we talk about. And the thing is, what they want to talk about to us feels boring as all get out. I've got one that likes to play gorilla tag. I think the game is dumb. I don't think it's fun to watch. I don't enjoy it, but she really, really enjoys it. I'm on her friends, got the conversations all. She's younger, got the conversations tracked and such. But if I don't show interest in that, she won't open up to me about who's talking to her, about what's happening. And so I think it's very important to at least take a few minutes to understand their culture in that world. And I think that's where a lot of that openness starts. And I think when something does happen that's negative, I think it's really important to not be a Gestapo and you're banned from the internet for 1,000 years and you're never going to touch a phone again. I think it's very important to to keep that communication open because if you don't, then you just become an enemy. And then that predator plays you against the kid. And so I think that's super, super, super important. The other one thing I would say that is a very not quite there's nothing in that list that perfectly fits there, but a very common grooming technique I've seen is telling people they seem a lot older than they are and they're behaving a lot older than they are because their goal is to get them to behave a lot older than they are. And so those are my thoughts on it. Matt, I think you've been in this a bit more than I have as we just, reverse engineer the whole internet to help people with those investigations. But those are my thoughts on it from all of the people I've worked with over the years, and that's how I handle my kids. I also have a parents course on things like don't use the same password, and there's a whole other world and in that from an extortion perspective. But those are my thoughts on that.
In my humble opinion, to everyone that's tuning in right now, everything Elliot said, I think that's sage and great advice, and I picked up a few new things from that, Elliot, too. So, see, we're in a technical industry, but we're fathers and parents first. And Elliot, that's some fantastic, easily relatable grassroots advice that will help get the job done. I love it. Simple, easy, and effective.
Yeah, it's at least gets the ball kicked towards the goal in the right direction. So I
Yeah.
definitely don't go to hockey practice down here in Austin, though. Just gonna point that out.
They have hockey
We
in Texas. I didn't know that.
we do not have hockey. I said I do not go to hockey. We go to swim, we go to baseball, football. It's our holy sport. So
Got
not
it.
so much
Got it.
hockey.
Well, hey, we this is a great conversation. We'll put Elliot's blog and guideline in the show notes and plug anything that Matt you want to talk about. ATII, amazing organization. Go download their annual report from 2024. It's got some really good information in there. Um, I want to thank you, Matt. I want to thank Elliot and Dan. He had a drop, but I want to thank CACI's Dark Blue Intelligence Suite that we partnered with on a webinar earlier this month. We'll also put that in the show notes if you're interested in watching how ShadowDragon and Dark Blue partnered to look at some potential trafficking indicators using both dark web and social media and open web. And go again, check out ATII, follow moneyfightslavery.org and donate to the cause. Matt, I'll give you the last word.
Where I'd like to wrap is first of all, to thank you, David and Elliot, and my friends at CACI, the Dark Blue Suite, ShadowDragon, one more time for your efforts as just fantastic human beings, the support, the generosity in sponsoring the mission. Um, you just really can't do this without that. So I appreciate and thank you for the opportunity, all your support, and I want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in today. I hope that you found the past two episodes to be worth your time. And if you're a parent, just remember you've got this, breathe. You can do it. This is dark stuff, but you can win and you will win if you apply yourself using the tips that we shared today. Um, yeah, that's about
Thanks.
it.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you so much, Matt.
Till next time.
You have a safe and lovely day.